and I will share my screen there. Okay, so can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So the title, as I said, is Unlocking Project Success with Collaboration Science. So delighted to have Waypoint representatives here today to give us an understanding of collaboration science and how that will meet the challenges of PMs and provide opportunities in that space. So just before the introductions, I'm just going to give you guys, as we always do at these sessions, just a brief heads up on some upcoming Ireland chapter activities. So we have two upcoming Ireland chapter activities. We have an agile webinar, project management in organizations transitioning to a product-centric approach. That is scheduled for the 30th of November. It's a lunchtime webinar session, so you can join that session through the associated web link. We have a second important event in the early stages of December, which is the Ireland chapter of PMI annual general meeting. So again, an important meeting, obviously opportunity to touch base with all of our membership throughout the country, and a lot of important decisions and discussions will happen at that AGM in relation to the Ireland chapter. So that is scheduled for the 7th of December. It's an evening session. So hopefully you're able to join us for that. We have some other events that are scheduled, and if you want to refer to those events, just click onto the pmiireland.org website for further details. Okay, so in terms of today's session, I'm delighted to introduce our guest speakers. So we have Tony Farren from Waypoint. So Toby Farren, I should say. Toby is a thought leader on collaboration science and is the CEO of Waypoint Software. So delighted to have Toby with us. His colleague Keith Finglas is also with us. So Keith is an experienced program change manager and the CSO of Waypoint. So both Toby and Keith will cover aspects of collaboration science today, and as I said, will maybe bring us through how that relates to the challenges of PMs, but also the opportunities that that presents. So guys, I'll leave you to the floor. So if you want to present your screens, and if everybody could just go on mute except for Toby and Keith, please, including the dog.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'll shoot her.
He's so excited.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. As Anthony mentioned, my name's Toby Farren. I'm one of the co-founders at Waypoint Software. Waypoint is a systemic collaboration platform aimed at solving the issues of collaborating with multiple stakeholders at scale, particularly at an ecosystem level, but more and more across large organizations as well. The purpose of today's talk is really to look at some of the underlying principles which have led us to the development of our software and the underlying technology protocol. So the way the structure is kind of going to work here, we're going to walk through some of the, I guess, the theoretical elements of collaboration science as we go through. And then in relation to each of those, we're going to talk about the application, how it can be employed in both the project management context and an organizational change context. After that, we're going to introduce our technology protocol, which is really a way of taking all these principles and designing an implementable technology stack. Well, that protocol can also be implemented using your own technologies. We're going to be pushing out a lot of best practice guides around collaboration science if you're more interested in kind of embarking on this journey on your own. So with that in mind, I guess we're going to jump into collaboration science. So yeah, fantastic quote from Helen Keller there. Really, the sentiment behind this is that more and more today, nobody is equipped to do everything by themselves. The more that you connect to others and bring people along with you on that journey, and you involve them right from the start, the more primed you are for success. And that's become more and more evident over the last couple of years. So as we look at, the evidence behind that, the growing need for collaboration, over the last 6-7 years, we've been dealing with a number of different organizations of different sizes, including development agencies in South America, startups, multinationals, SMEs, consultants, and everything in between. And I guess what this represents is our summary findings from the main challenge areas that people are facing in relation to ways of working, particularly in relation to collaboration. And we've kind of reduced this down to some high-level problem statements on the left. So globalization, growing customer expectations, the complexity of operations, and the pace at which technology is advancing. You can see the impact that's having on both organizations and product managers in the middle. And then really, when we look at solutions to these issues, effectively, we've identified 4 components which belong to collaboration. If you want to co-create value faster, if you want to engage your market faster, your user base, adapt your projects and your strategies faster, be more open about your transparencies and resources, your processes and your resources, and be able to adopt technology at a synchronized pace at every level within an organization, with your partners, with your suppliers, etc. So really, we've identified collaboration excellence as a way of driving these behaviors in any sort of organization.
So just on this one, this is about why this is important for project managers, and we've put together a few of those, the main reasons. The first one is that the project management role is continually expanding and transitioning to a change agent role, where the impact of the project it's not just, or the quality of the project isn't just about the internal execution, it's also about the external connectivity to the organization. Just very fundamentally, to make sure that the output is actually used and that it fulfills a need that the organization has. And this requires new things from PMs about having a broader reach, a broader view, and a broader ability to connect with the wider organization that they're sitting in. Increasingly as well, there's repeat or background tasks are becoming automated. So there's there's something pulling us and something driving us. The nature of the role, that this challenge for PMs, is that we're being asked to do more network relationship management. We've got far more data streams to look at, not just the pure project ones, and the contextualization to make sure we understand, how does this fit with the organization and where it's going, and then the value creation beyond the deliverables. One of our clients has recently begun to explore putting metrics for the project in place which go beyond handover. They want to look at the first year reviews to sort of say, did it actually give back what it was supposed to give? And this is for very major infrastructural projects. The last point is that being able to understand how collaborative systems and the networks that underpin them function is critical to being able to interact with them and get this at scale and make it work for you. So what we're hoping to deliver in the second section is what are those deeper kind of areas that help you understand what on the face value are the impacts of the things that the PM see.
So we talked about collaborative excellence there. Another word we use for that is pathfinding. It's kind of our own name for it. And really what we're presenting here is, so pathfinding is the ability of people to work together across organizational boundaries in a state of flow to solve wicked problems and generate mutual benefit for those involved. Pathfinding as a practice has been designed based on key collaboration science principles, which we're going to be looking at in depth in a moment. And pathfinding as a practice can lead to tremendous benefits in the organization beyond better knowledge exchange and better project socialization. It's just improved speed and productivity, better decision making, more inputs at decision points, and generally just better problem solving and value creation across the organization. So by understanding pathfinding, as well as the tools that we're hoping to provide with the protocol and the software, as well as understanding the scientific principles that have kind of led to these management approaches, we feel that project managers will be better suited to adapt these new ways of working over the next few years.
Okay, and the truth is that I think there's been quite a number of realizations over the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years that there are these deeper, wider needs, and there's been a number of models put forward to try and identify them. You'll all be familiar with the first one on the left is the project maturity model for a project capability. The second one is a change model by John Hayes, and it always interests me that the pure PM part is actually the plan and the implement. But if you want an effective project, you've got to do all the other components all around that to make sure that you're taking on board where the organization is going, that you're actually picking the right project in the first place. And then when it's all finished, that you're actually sustaining the impact. So there's a much wider implication coming through for PMs than just the plan and implement. In the work that we've done in different sectors, the scaled agile guys, in the framework that they talk about that the technical piece is like steps, 7, 8, 9, 8, 9, 10. But the rest of it is all incredibly important for actually reaching into the organization, getting the organization prepared, and making sure the organization is ready to take on board the technical products that are launched. And this is where they're openly saying they're struggling. Like they can do their own stuff really well, but reaching out to the wider organization is a massive challenge. And then the last one is the McKinsey 3 Horizon model about looking at where the organization is in terms of what it's currently doing and what it wants to do in the future, and how it actually figures that out and puts it in place. And again, you're looking at wide interpretations, or reaching out wide to the organization, beyond the organization, to understand what's capable. So the need is becoming clear. There's a very small number of companies that are able to do this, but it takes a huge amount of effort to do it, and it's quite onerous. And a lot of the clients we talk to, they're not yet convinced that they need to put that massive effort in place, or that massive effort is warranted. It's still an open area. And with that around the impact, I'm going to hand over to Toby to look at if you like the old L'Oreal ad, the science behind all this.
So we mentioned before, there's several kind of emerging trends that are happening in relation to collaboration science. It is an emerging field, so there's crossover with other areas certainly, but we've identified kind of 6 areas that we feel are defining and shaping collaboration science right now. There are many more, and if you're interested in learning about those, feel free to reach out. But the 6 that we're going to be focusing on today, the core ones, are network science, so the ability to understand and analyze network structures, particularly in relation to social and organizational context. Complexity theory and complex adaptive systems. So this is, about the interconnectedness of networks, the behaviors that occur across them, and the dynamics that happen over time as the network evolves. Chaos theory talks about how small changes in a network early on can lead to massively different outcomes over a period of time. And the earlier that change occurs, the bigger the potential deviation. Game theory talks about how people typically behave across networks, politically, socially, and in relation to these social dynamics. Generative science kind of talks about, we're talking about the complexity of these networks. It studies how value beyond the expected can emerge out of these networks when you've put the infrastructure in place and you foster that environment. The value can become exponential. And dual phase evolution is really a combination of all the other areas. It's kind of a North Star in terms of where a network-based organization or an organization adopting network-based collaborative techniques could hope to end up. And really, this is the ability for an organization and everybody in it, the ability for them to pivot between kind of slow, considered pace and a rapid, agile pace, and be able to move back and forth between those in relation to the needs and demands of the users and the customers. So those are kind of the 6 areas we'll be focusing on today. So first, and really this is, network science is the foundation of any collaborative system. Even at a 101 level or a basic level, it is very important for project managers to understand the core building blocks of any network. And many of you may be familiar with these, especially if you work in IT or telecommunications or any sort of kind of network-based area. So any network is comprised of what's known as nodes and edges. So within any network, a node represents any sort of object. It can be a person, a piece of information, a data point, a deliverable, a skill, any sort of object that exists within that ecosystem or network. And each of those nodes has specific properties which define what it is effectively. Edges then connect nodes, and they dictate the relationship between those nodes, or the interaction between those nodes. That's the core of any network. Now, as you look at kind of the shapes of networks at a kind of a practical level beyond the minute, there's typically three forms or shapes that networks can take. These are centralized, decentralized, and distributed. So, and beyond that, there's edges can connect nodes to each other different ways. They can be lateral, so it's a one-directional connection, bilateral, which means two directions, or non-directed, which means it's a soft or a passive link between them. So if we look at that in real terms, once or twice more, yeah, there you go. If you look at that in real terms, we're kind of moving beyond the abstract. Here's a little single organizational unit. It shows that the PM and the team members have a bilateral relationship in terms of the ability working with each other. The PM is laterally reporting to the PMO, and the PMO is laterally reporting to the CEO. Both the PMO and the CEO have passive links to the team members. So that's really just an expression of how that might look at any unit level. So if we look at the different types of networks then, so centralized first, right? A centralized network structure, basically all the nodes are connected through a central node, which is command and control point for any sort of communication, decisions, further events that take place across the network. If you remove the purple node in the network, the system collapses. If you just look at some of the real life examples there, very, very traditional hierarchical setup, basically kind of single voice, get it done style scenario. And Keith's going to talk a little bit more about centralized networks in a practical point. You want to go back to the centralized?
Oh yeah, sure.
So go ahead.
Yeah, it was just to kind of the application examples are just to show where this comes up. So typically the hierarchical thing is the natural pyramid that we all use to illustrate an organization. But these kinds of relationships are useful elsewhere, like in impact analysis or root cause. That you'll all be familiar with the Ishikawa diagram for problem solving. So they pop up in many kind of areas.
Yeah, I would say each of these network types kind of represents a management style, but regardless of if you're collaborative, hierarchical, or anywhere in between, you can still use these lenses for all sorts of different activities across your project at different levels of focus. So if we move on to kind of a decentralized model, this is distributing the centrality a little bit, de-risking having a single point of failure. This is typically where most organizations sit. Some organizations sit between centralized and decentralized, but most are here, and that may come of a shock. I know when people think about decentralized, they think about blockchains and DAOs and all sorts of things, but the truth is that those are distributed networks. A decentralized network would be kind of the standard shape of most department-driven organizations. And in terms of application, you can see this there in a matrix-driven environment. But it can also be used for several different techniques at a team level as well.
And it's probably worth noting that matrix-driven and cross-team coordination has been around for a long time. It's well understood, I think, and it can be done very, very well. But in each organization, it seems to sort of come and go with the permanent hierarchy staying as the permanent thing, and the matrix capability varying. And I think a number of our clients are talking about how do they make that matrix capability more permanent, so it's a fully extant version of the organization or part of the organization.
So if we move on to the third type, then a distributed network. So every node here is interconnected and can operate independently. So it means that if you take out a node out of this network, the network simply reassembles and continues on as it had. So organizations or processes or project components that are set up or viewed this way are much more resilient to disruptions.
And it always intrigues me about there are isolated point uses of this to sort of demonstrate how effective it can be. In the more extreme versions, like Semler's self-managing teams, you have teams of workers in a cell in a factory who figure out their own salary. It's and it can be regarded as quite extreme from the norm, but it is quite capable and quite reliable.
Right. And it's not about necessarily replacing the hierarchy with a fully distributed network, right? It's a journey.
It's within it.
There's a guy called Cotter who proposes a dual operating system model where you talk about the hierarchy sitting alongside a network-based approach, where the network-based approach is used for new areas like innovation or strategy, etc. And then the hierarchy is used for traditional, more well understood or repeatable areas.
Yeah, and
business as usual.
His exhortation to companies is that you don't have an option to turn on and off the equivalent of the matrix management, the cloud side. It's got to be there permanently. The two things have to function in parallel, doing their respective roles.
Outside of formal organizations, we're seeing some very interesting stuff here, like decentralized autonomous organizations, where individual teams or companies can form very, very quickly, form working relationships, compensation agreements, legal agreements, etc. Yeah. So if we look at a network, like a network isn't a static lens where you can only find one thing out, right? If we think about these objects across a network, we can analyze these through many, many different lenses depending on what we're trying to understand. So for example, we could be looking at the skill complementation of 20 different people in a network, or the social ties. The people or the nodes are the same, but the connections that we're interested in and the analysis method will change. And really, if you're particularly in relation to deep ecosystem mapping, trying to understand, the true value of the environment that your project sits in, it's imperative to really get this multi-lens view of what's going on in the collaborative environment.
I think it's worth noting that there are numerous examples of people who have used this in terms of where it applies. The interesting one is the kind of von Hippel stuff about finding lead users, and how in an organization the best technicians don't always follow the hierarchy. And the way to identify the best technicians is to ask around as to which technician is the most respected for his or her ability to problem solve and to get things done in the field. So that the social network, for example, can sit within the hierarchy, but it can be quite different to the actual grade by grade hierarchy. And I'm sure experienced PMs know this as well, because in terms of trying to get the work done, you have to negotiate these kinds of networks as well to achieve what you want to achieve.
So we've looked at kind of the foundations of what a network is, and I guess chaos theory really drives home why it matters, why you need to understand your network to collaborate effectively, particularly in distributed networks where the command and control or decision-making authority may be lighter, depending on who you're working with. Chaos theory really talks about, if we introduce a small change early on, that could lead to a massive deviation in outcomes at the end of the journey. So the earlier something is introduced to the network or to the system, the more the outcome at the end of the journey will differ. So you can see here that the basic shape with the blue nodes was the exact same. A small orange node was introduced in the middle one, and a small purple node was introduced on the right one. And the shape at the end was completely different based on one small input. So it really speaks to the importance engaging everybody in the requirements gathering stage to see that you fully canvass the network at your starting point.
The key thing for me is probably identifying, just how important the actual requirements. I mean, misidentifying or not understanding a fundamental need can have a major impact on the project. So it can change the flow of the project entirely. And it follows in the other areas as well about, not finding out what you needed to find out and the impact it can have.
For example, there's a technique called cascade planning, which is kind of like the ugly cousin of critical chain, critical path, where it's basically like, how can we simulate a series of events, almost like a domino fall, which is very useful for scenario planning and understanding different outcomes.
Okay.
So we've talked about networks and why they're important. Next, we're going to talk about how they evolve over time. So this is a very popular area at the moment, complexity theory and complex adaptive systems. There are many, many consultants and project managers flocking to this space to better understand the dynamics of their organizations. Effectively, what this says is that between any nodes in a system, aside from the direct ties or link, there's also feedback loops occurring between these elements that are constantly taking place. And these feedback loops can actually change or alter the shape of a node or the behavior of the node or the properties within it over time. So you can see here, as a result of these two nodes having a feedback loop between them, it's actually changed the shape of both of them. So that's at a very, very small level, but if you think about a network, how it expands over time with dynamic effects, there's a huge amount of complexity occurring there. And the ability to map that, particularly in real time, is extremely valuable for any sort of strategic decision making.
I think what fascinates me about it is the number of consultants and process experts we're working with who are developing processes for these areas, these types of things like ecosystem mapping, and they don't really have tools for it. So that's why we feel very comfortable working with them, because it suits what we're trying to do. And it's where one of our clients is setting up a healthcare system where they've got, I think, 120 different actors, if you like, different companies, and they're trying to figure out and work together to understand where are the opportunities and how do they influence each other in terms of what's happening. And it's to do it in a fairly open, managed way so that they can figure things out and work together to get things done. Otherwise, it tends to be a little bit serendipitous if you're lucky, or just dead end if
chaotic.
you're not. Yeah.
You want to balance that chaos with, organizational alignment, the goals that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And if we move into chaos, or rather we move past chaos,
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
If we expand on chaos theory, so chaos theory talks about how small changes early on can lead to vastly different outcomes. And if we think about that across a collaborative network over time, and we also think about the complex adaptive nature, the feedback loops between the people within it, we can see that what starts as a dialogue between two people in a system changes the perspective of those people and then brings in a third, and then over time evolves into a proposition that wasn't even considered early on. This is where evolution sits. It's when you develop environments that allow for this emergent behavior, you unlock doors and pathways to value that you may not have even considered, that's trapped within your organization, but is there. And typically this is seen, with innovation, creativity, etc. What we're trying to do with our own protocol is kind of anchor this emergent behavior to organizational objectives and desires and processes, right? So it's not this fully chaotic environment. You're able to take advantage of that, but tie it to your business objectives and your project objectives.
Yeah, I suppose for me, the kind of historical connection with this is that I've always been curious about why a startup can outperform a large company with 10,000 people. And I think it's because in the large company, they're not able to connect to the knowledge that they have across all the 10,000 people. So a big part of what we're trying to do is to make that possible so you can tap into that knowledge. And in fact, there's a New York expert called Clay Shirky who talks about the cognitive surplus in organizations, where the amount of capability, knowledge, and learning that isn't tapped into is actually very considerable. So a big part of what we're about is trying to make that possible, and make it possible in order to enable and enhance projects and the general direction of the company.
It's kind of more freeform activity. Could also be compartmentalized. So, for example, some of our clients use a sandbox implementation, which basically creates like a sub-organization within that organization, which has all these emergent rules and effects, and budget is put there. But below that, it allows for that more chaotic behavior. It's still compartmentalized and de-risked within the overall organizational context.
Okay.
So what about how people actually behave across systems? This is really important, particularly in distributed networks or when you're trying collaborative management approaches. Like we talked about before, in these environments, there's less ability to simply say, you know, this is your task, this is your delivery, get it done. So the more distributed the network, the less possible that is. So really, we look at game theory to understand the behavioral, social, political dynamics that occur across complex systems and how people can make decisions, strategically interact and drive positive results. So we've kind of picked a couple of examples here in relation to the kind of behaviors that you'd see in the environment, the challenges they produce, and some of the solutions you can use to, or techniques you can use to approach those. There's loads of these, and we're happy to share them. This is really just a sample.
Do you want to talk about each one just to sort of, or show them?
Yeah, I'll give one or two examples. So in a highly competitive environment, the resources are typically split, right? You're fighting over resources. And so there's an optimal allocation formula which can be used there. When you're in a collaborative environment, it's really about, well, you know, people want to work together, but they may have different interests or drivers or prerogatives. So it's about creating shared incentives. There's many of these. They're based on things like the Nash equilibrium. They go back quite far in terms of science. People have been studying social networks very recently, and it's produced a lot of quality data around these behaviors. And a lot of that intelligence is kind of feeding into our own thinking.
Okay.
So if you think about all the other things that we've talked about so far, dual phase evolution is effectively the North Star for any organization to get to in relation to all this stuff, in relation to running collaborative networks. This is scaled collaborative flow. Your organization working in a very natural way with itself, with its audience, with its customers, with its users. And the basic principle in this is basically that any complex or emergent system basically moves back and forth between two distinct phases. A phase of kind of rapid changes and increments and inputs, and a stage of more considered, kind of slower methodological analysis and decision making. So the ability to move back and forth between two different speeds or modes of planning and collaboration is really critical for sustaining these collaborative efforts. You can't do agile forever. You'll burn everybody out, and you'll lose sight of the overall objectives. But if you do waterfall forever, you don't get the broader engagement, and your decision-making cycles are perhaps too slow to actually respond to market needs. So this really proposes the ability for an organization to, the entirety of the organization collaboratively, to move back and forth between these two states of project execution.
Yeah, and I think the challenge here, the interesting one here for us, is working with clients who, in the Horizon 2 of the McKinsey model, they want a PMO for the normal projects and an innovation PMO for the weird stuff. And then it's how the two talk to each other. And with several clients, we've actually come up with a protocol that when a new project comes up, it actually decides, is this going to a normal projects group or is it going to the innovation projects group? And it comes down to the degree of ambiguity and risk in it. So it's a nice way of thinking about how to deal with emerging possibilities.
So those are kind of the theoretical areas that we're thinking about and talking about on a high level. Obviously, there's a huge amount below that, but we don't want to go too far into the science today. The Pathfinder protocol we've designed as a way for teams and organizations and ecosystems to implement collaborative science and collaborative excellence in their organization. So it enables distributed sets of individuals and teams to make sense of their network or environment, prioritize steps, and effectively guide decision-making, deliverables, data analysis towards shared targeted outcomes. And this is completely scalable from a small team of 2-3 people up to an entire ecosystem with multi-organization, multi-departments, multi-organizations. This protocol we're developing and making available through our software platform, which is currently in pilot and launching into beta in January. But we're also making available best practice visual playbook for free on our website, which will help organizations interested in collaboration science and achieving collaborative excellence, doing so kind of using their own technical stack, or maybe they'd like to do it themselves. So that content will be available over the coming weeks as well. Effectively, what the protocol does is it ties any process to any network. So effectively, you can run and socialize project processes, adapting them as you go, and engage the user base, the community, the project team, any sorts of stakeholders in that process. And you can tap out them, you can tap out beyond them, you can connect into any element of the network at any point in time in the process. So really, what we're blending here is kind of a project execution environment, a value orientation environment, but also making sure that the overall network is brought along on that journey. And that can be applied for any sort of organizational process.
And it's probably worth noting that the a couple of points that with each step in the process, what we're hoping to do is make the potential network, the potential in the network connect to the step. So if you don't need anything and you can complete the step, that's fine. You don't need to access the potential of the population. But if you get a problem, it means you on tap, you've got the knowledge and expertise across the organization. And it's not that you're going to ask everybody the same question. There is a criteria and search engine to help you identify who are the 3 people out of the 4,000 who can actually help us with this issue. But it's this issue right now, today. It's not, over the next few months when we meet each other at the summer picnic and think, oh, it would have been lovely if we'd met you at the time we were actually doing the work. It's very, very based on
baked into the process.
Yeah, it's based on what we're doing right now. In fact, one of the use cases that was given to us was, imagine a project team on a Tuesday morning at 10:15, they have a question. The person who has the answer was moved to Denmark 6 months ago. How can they get the answer by 12 o'clock? And that's the kind of thing we're trying to answer within, large organizations or ecosystems. And that kind of brings us to this expression. This is what we've done in the upper level, the typical project management journey. We've tried to imagine across the project life cycle, and then for each of the detailed things that normally take place, what degree of discussion takes place with the users or customer population and with the internal organization and network. And ideally, the more you penetrate each and the more you penetrate them early, the better you're going to be, because you'll pick them up. The deeper the penetration, you'll pick up valuable stuff, like you'll get more inputs per step. And that means you'll have better informed decisions, and you also want to make them faster. That's part of it. The lessons learned is actually baked into what you're doing as you go. So you get a much shorter cycle time in all the necessary aspects of as you go along the user journey. And we've tried to indicate what happens, the difference between the top and the bottom is you just have much deeper penetration, far more insights, far more feedback, and far more information available to the project team as they're working. And it should make for much better decisions at each step as you go through. Toby, are you happy with that, or do you want to?
Yeah. Happy with that. So aside from the ability to actually drive these collaborative project activities on the platform, another component of what we do is we're mapping collaboration. So as you collaborate, as you run projects, run processes, run sprints, a reflection of the collaborative dynamics will be available to those participating, so you can understand what skills are complementing what other skills, what skills are driving positive strategic results, what processes are working, etc. This is a multi-layered, multi-dimensional analysis tool to really understand how your organization or ecosystem are working together and delivering value.
And I think this is a lovely expression. It's a very important working tool, but it's also a lovely expression of what's actually going on. That from the science, if you like, that we discussed in section B, where we've got 6 different areas that are informing this, they sit below it and help you understand what they should look like and how to do it. All the projects sit above it, and you can reduce the projects down in terms of what's the initiative, which sprint are we in, what processes are we doing, what steps are we trying to get done, what information does the team have about each step, what skills and abilities do they have or are they missing, and how do we get them the right skills or abilities for each specific step. So it on one side of the coin, it's the projects and how they get done. On the other side, it's the deep theory underpinning how do we effectively make mass collaboration possible.
Map it.
And map it, yeah.
So in terms of the actual platform that we'll be using to roll out this protocol, the platform's called Waypoint. It's rolling out in January. Here's a couple of screenshots just demonstrating some of the capabilities here. We're seeing kind of the people side of things. People exist across a global network. You can understand where they sit in terms of shared initiatives, what processes and projects they're involved with, their skills, their interests, signals that they've been promoting, etc. So this is very, very similar to social network dynamics that you may see, but it's kind of in a project or a process environment rather than a communications one.
And I think a key part about this is tapping into the organization, that it's not just about the job description and the assumed skills that go with that current job description. It's also about the fact that we have a human who has 5, 10, 15, 20 years of lived experience, their career, they've worked in multiple different sections, they have interests and passions. And what we want to do is connect their interests and passions and skills to the work that's being done. Now, that has to come with a management structure that enables that we're not talking about people just arbitrarily walking away from what they're doing. It has to have guides around how that takes place. But what we're trying to do is to connect the people who have the answer or the skills with the step in the process of the project that actually needs them or could benefit from them. And if the permissions are actually okay on the organization side, then they can participate in and contribute to the projects.
Yeah, just echo what Keith said there. It's about balancing stability and freedom and flexibility, right? So that sweet spot will be different for organizations, but you can customize the freedom of the network depending on your own organizational setup or culture.
Yeah. One of the very, as an example, one of the very matter of fact sets of rules that one organization we worked with had was that they had 3 rules for any employee who might want to participate in something apart from their current day job. One was they had to want to do it, so nobody could be forced to do it. The second one was their performance had to be at least acceptable. If they were having performance issues, they couldn't distract themselves with something beyond their work. And the third thing was the business unit had to be able to cope with them taking 10% or 15% or whatever it was to contribute to the project that was going on. And if it happened to be busy for cyclical reasons or whatever like that, you can imagine, for example, asking for someone from finance at year end, it's not really going to be possible because they've just got so much on in a very critical function. So it was a very matter of fact way of giving agency to the employees, but also making sure that the business as usual Horizon 1 type stuff keeps getting done. So it was well structured and it worked out very well. The interesting thing for me about it was that when we went back and audited with them after about 18 months, 1/3 of the staff on the site had taken part in nothing. They were quite comfortable not doing it. And there wasn't an issue. There was no comeback. There was no retribution. That was perfectly okay. They were working on their core work and it was fine. 1/3 of the staff had done one initiative and 1/3 had done more than one initiative. And I always think it's kind of down to the personal comfort with change that employees have. But we're enabling that. We're not restricting it. We're not forcing people into the wrong shape with this. So it's meant to enable and enhance the people and give them agency over what they might do.
So this is just an example project environment. We see a couple of different pathways or processes going on. The focus here is really the business model canvas. Here you can see different steps within these steps, which effectively are live rooms for people to collaborate. Data can be processed, decisions can be made, deliverables can be produced. People can actually go live within these steps if they'd like to double down on focus. So the system is asynchronous in terms of everybody doesn't need to be online at the same time, and it can continue to function. You don't need to meet up like on Mural to get something done, for example. But if you do want that live kind of event mode for key activity, key surges of activity, you can go live within that step, and that's going to notify people as well.
I think a key thing for me as a kind of an experienced PM and PMO manager, program manager, is that a key part of this is you can take any kind of project process and you can create a template for it and put it in, and you can the people, you can assign people to it, and you can, in any given step, you can see, well, who in the organization could help, or do we have a create occur where we need to go out and ask for 200 people to give us insight in a particular step. So you can do that. Each step is almost like a digital workplace in its own right. But a big part of it, a big part of it for the organization is you start seeing, well, which processes are being used, and which processes are being used a lot, and what way are they being used. And we give the teams autonomy. These are knowledge workers who often have to change a process. so they have to add something to it or not use something that's already there. We give them that autonomy. They can create a new step just by going in, clicking and creating a new step, but we track it as well. So over time, the organization can see which processes are being used. They can Pareto the ones that are being used the most. They can use the crowdsourcing again to even say, well, for each process, we should have crowd feedback on what is it going well. And if we can look at the last 10 times the process was used, what was added? Do we need to make that permanent? What wasn't used? Which steps aren't being used? And are they not being used because they're no longer relevant? Or are they not being used because actually the people's training isn't quite good enough that they're able to do it the way they should? So, and you can take appropriate action. We're not looking to sort of cause problems for anybody. We're looking to give visibility to where these issues are so that people can address them themselves.
Process improvements.
Yeah. It goes to the heart of enabling good process development within organizations.
I think we have one more, just another example process here, and then we can, I think we have one last slide.
Yeah.
Just within any given step, you can analyze data through various different lenses. It's all very easy to use. It's multiplayer, it's real time. So lots of people can jump in the step here, start playing around with data, forming patterns, understanding the landscape. And at any point, you can reach out to your network to scan for information or to request new information. So here we're looking at, different ideas and trends and risks and insights that exist across the network. And we're pulling those in to help with the canvassing and the decision making at this point.
I think an interesting thing to think about is that for each step in the process, you might consider that you can think about, well, what inputs do we need and who could we get them from? And you can think about how far or wide do we need to go or should we go? What activities will we do within the step and who needs to do them? Is it just one or two from the core team or all the core team or the core team plus other people because that's what's needed? And for the outputs, where are the outputs going? Who needs them? What do they want with them? So it's a very good kind of cross collaboration promoter. And I think that's it.
If you'd like to learn more about the protocol or the software or the playbooks that we'll be producing, if you'd like to do it yourself, you can find me at toby.farren@waypoint.software. Alternatively, you can find Keith at the same email address, keith.finglas@waypoint.software.
Great, guys. Thank you for that, Keith and Toby. I'm just looking at the clock here. We're about 10 to the hour, so we've got time for one or two questions. Just looking at the chat there. Let me just see what we've got in the chat. I think there was one question there from Theo. Is there another way for these networks to be formed other than organically? Also, how would such a case be supported by the traditional company org chart? You're on mute there, sorry, Toby.
So yes, they can be formed in other ways or other than organically. The Cotter model specifically has been designed that way. It's been designed as a kind of a network bolt-on to hierarchical organizations. So it's not trying to, transform the organization overnight or flip the organization on its head, but about slowly introducing the benefits of network-based collaboration into that environment and complementing it where possible.
Yeah, and
network
I think
theory doesn't necessarily shut down hierarchy. It complements it when the blend is right.
Yeah, I would say, and if you have an existing organization, it's a fantastic place to start. But it means you can feed it into you can feed the network information into the system in a structured way. But what we're also finding is companies are saying they want to go beyond that. So they want to capture the internal networks, but they also want to connect to, for example, suppliers. One company we're talking to are very anxious. The first group they want to get on are people that they work with to create bids for new work from the agencies that are their customers. And then the ultimate goal for a lot of companies is actually connect to their clients so that the clients are actually taking part in the early design reviews, if you like, and feeding back on what they're actually doing. So I think you can think about I think a nice way to think about it would be, what are the couple of good reasons you could start off? One would be skills or interests. Let's look for that. If we don't already have special interest groups, can we see what natural special interest groups we might need? what do we have, and what do we not have that we might need in a year or two. One of the companies we're working with, they have a 3-layer model for that. They go, what are we currently training our people in? What are we providing training for that people might want to, that we need them in a year or two, like a master's or a longer program? And what are people doing that we don't know if we're going to need, but we're glad to know that they're doing it, because then we might be able to use it. So it's a way of preparing for the future when you openly acknowledge you can't know the future, so you're not going to get it right all the time.
It's not a binary thing, you know, either implement or you don't. Network-based organizational models can be implemented, you know, at various different levels, as an individual technique in a project, all the way up to the way that you run your company, you know.
Sorry, Anthony, you were going to ask one.
No, a question I probably had was, is the Pathfinder protocol product, is this more aimed at larger companies where there is, I suppose, maybe in very large companies where there just isn't that closeness of networks and community and understanding, and I suppose you need to have a product like this from a collaboration point of view, or do you tend to work with organizations at all levels and scales, and even at a small level?
So we're actually seeing that the problem's kind of happening at every level, right? The network doesn't have to be your organization. If you imagine a startup trying to get something off the ground, right, they've got a network around themselves. It might not be within the organization, but they're still trying to engage customers, validate their proposition, build supporters, etc. So the ecosystem-wide collaboration is actually where we're seeing the most interest. As an internal solution, provides a lot of value and a lot of people jumping on that. But the big thing that is kind of jumping out to people as a differentiator is this allows me to securely and realistically work with my partners, my supply chain, and even beyond them on new opportunities. In relation to kind of PMO, project management, all this kind of stuff, like this isn't supposed to replace other methodologies or anything like this. It's not proposing anything like that. It's how do we blend existing methodologies with collaboration science. It's not a replacer, it's a booster.
And Claire, Claire Gately, on your question, it's a great question about the difference between normal and innovation project PMOs. It's the kind of criteria were used where do we have the skills for it? If we have most of the skills, it's tending towards normal. What are the risks? What processes would we need? What's the size of the project? There's a number of criteria like that. And basically what it came down to was if we know enough to do it at an acceptable level of risk, then we can do it in the normal PMO. If it's my daughter puts it under the umbrella term of weird shit. If it looks risky and weird, if in a 2 or 3 sentence definition the word new appears more than twice, then that's a more of an innovation one where you need to do some tests first to get rid of a couple of those news, so you can say we've had a look at it, we can scope it. If you can scope it comfortably and reliably, then it's just a normal project. If there's questions about, if there's questions that it looks ambiguous or dodgy, if it just doesn't feel good or smell good, then it's an innovation candidate, because you can do it at smaller scale, and you do it to build your knowledge to be able to do it at bigger scale.
Very good, guys. I'm going to wrap it up there. We're just 5 minutes short of the hour. So I just want to thank Keith and Toby for their fascinating insight into collaboration science. I think we've heard a lot of different aspects and concepts today. We've heard about dual path evolutions and chaos theories and complexity theories and all of that stuff that I suppose maybe we see happen on a day-to-day basis in organizations, but I think we got a different perspective of it today, and a very insightful perspective. I think the question that Claire Gately asked, and which you've answered, Keith, around just different PMOs, innovative PMOs versus a normal PMO, I think is an interesting concept and a good one.
Actually, I would put in one word of caution from personal experience. One of the things I discovered was that a lot of PMs in the normal PMO space, they don't translate well to the innovation space, because they're very good in the normal space because they're very good at killing ambiguity. If you put someone like that in an innovation PMO, they will be very uncomfortable, and it'll be a real problem.
Sure, very good. I mean, again, I think some of the other aspects that you talked about in terms of Pathfinder protocol I suppose identifying SMEs, mapping collaborations, understanding what skills are required for certain topics and who might be the right people to get involved in those, and then bringing that into, I suppose, tapping into the organization, I think is the term that you used, and then bringing that into chat rooms and trying to progress forward with data and concept discussions. I think is just really interesting and fascinating. So again, thank you for that that presentation and that insight. So guys, I think we'll leave it there. We'll leave it there, guys. There will be a recording. There has been a recording made for this, so we will issue this both to our PMI members, and a YouTube version will go out to our non-members. There will be a PDU associated with this as well, and that will be an automated credit to PMI members that will be allocated over the next few weeks. So just watch out for that. So thanks again, Keith, and thanks, Toby, and thanks to everybody that's participated.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Good luck.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, I think we're down to the last few guys, yourself, myself, and Toby, Keith. So well done. I thought that was, very well executed. Quite interesting. And I suppose I listened to the presentation yesterday, but I think when you put the meat and the flesh on it today, it certainly resonated with me on a number of different fronts. I thought as I said, I thought the Pathfinder protocol aspect and the detail around that was really interesting, and the comments that came back from everybody, reflected that. So I think there's quite a bit of interest there. Like I said, we will certainly make this video available. It'll be available to anybody now from a PMI point of view on the team site, but we'll create a separate YouTube version of that over the next week or two. So Sinead from our marketing team will be in contact with you, and we can issue that one separately.
Great. And I think what might be worth thinking, based on the questions and all that, is whether or not it'd be worth considering a follow-up perhaps after Christmas or something, where we go through some of the more detailed aspects or something like that, but only if there's sufficient interest. Yeah, well, look, we're open to, I suppose, a calendar for 2024,
sure. And whether it be, I don't know whether it would be early in Q1. There's quite a bit of stuff going on, but certainly I think a follow-up session would be fine down the line, so we can talk about that separately, Keith.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah. So look,
thank you very much.
Very enjoyable. So appreciate that.
Pleasure. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye.
All the best. Take care.